In this video, we are going to cover the top 5 questions that we've been getting over the last few years on how we moved to the USA. Question number 1, when did we know we wanted to move to the USA? Number 1, I've always known I've wanted to move elsewhere and work in other places other than the UK from quite a young age. The moment I personally remember wanting to move to the USA was probably when I started working at the company I'm working at now. So about when I was 25 years old, 12 years ago.
So what triggered that idea that you wanted to move at 25?
Probably because, that's a very good question actually. It's an additional question.
It's not, it's a follow-up question because I don't know the reason why.
No, so I think I knew because previously gone to the USA, I think when I was 20 for the first time with Ant, he'd taken me there for my birthday and we went to Florida. And I think as soon as I visited the USA, I thought actually this is somewhere I could see myself. And that was around 20, but I knew I hadn't seriously considered it at that point. It was only when I started working for that company and I knew of other people who had moved over to the USA that I really thought, actually, this is something I want to do for me.
For me, I had an epiphany much younger. So I think I was 14 when I first came to the US. And I think before I'd even exited the plane, I'd realized that it was the place for me. And not necessarily because of the US, I didn't really know much other than films and everything. It was more, oh, there's sun and heat, which just doesn't exist in the UK. And then I learned about better salaries and cheaper homes and all of these positives.
You learned a lot at a young age.
I did. I'm interested in these things. I'm interested in the mechanics of life. The practical side of it was the US was cheaper to live because it had cheaper homes, lower taxes. You earned more money and you could live in the sun. What is there not to love about the US? So from 14, I decided that was it for me. I had to leave the UK and move to the US.
I was just thinking, when did we actively discuss moving between you and I? Because you said you've always wanted to move since 14. I don't actually remember us ever having the distinct conversation around moving. It's a funny one.
Yeah.
Maybe we just both knew.
There's no distinct moment. So the moment of wanting to leave the UK is very distinct for me. I don't remember us discussing that. I think we've always talked about not being in the UK.
Yeah.
We've always been open. Stina spent most of the previous 4 or 5 years half in the country, half out of the country. And I was always thinking, well, when the opportunity comes out, I'm out immediately. So we kind of just had that as an understanding. I don't think we needed to talk about it specifically. Question 2 is, how did we move here? How did we actually get here? It's a good question because I think really how you get here is much like everything in life. If you want something, you kind of find ways to get here. We were in a really fortunate position already because Selena worked for an international company with offices and actually their headquarters here. So it's easier to navigate that way. You haven't got to go out and find a job in an international company or apply. We had an avenue. So from my point of view, the way we got here was I kept pestering Selena to just apply for a US job. I had a career, I had a relatively good career, relatively good job, paid fairly well, but I was ready to drop it like that.
100% I would say Ant was just ready for me to find any opportunity, and we did discuss, and I would say to him about when I would see these roles come up for the USA. There was a role I applied for much earlier on. I'm trying to think when that would have been. I think it was 2014. I did apply for a job.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was actively looking. It was always about timing and finding a role that was right. What truly triggered how we moved was Ant's mental break.
Is that how we got here?
I think it was, because it really was the start of, okay, I really need to figure out a way now, because it was, yes, we talked about moving to the USA, and yes, I'd spoken to a few people in the US about jobs, but I hadn't really pushed it until Ant had his mental break in the car one day, in traffic, in the rain.
In summer, mind you. In the middle of summer, it was raining, cold, and 7 hours of traffic. We were done at that point.
And he was like, I'm leaving, I'm selling the house. I'm like, whoa, 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 calm down.
I guess this is part of how we got here. I would see that as why at that point we left.
Yeah, that is why at that point. But it kind of led to how we got here, because at that moment, I told myself, I've got a year to try and figure out what role I'm going to get. And that's when I found this opportunity in the USA and someone who wanted me to take part in this key project that they were working on at the time. And because I was already managing a team and they wanted me to do a similar thing over in the USA, it meant that they knew the type of visa. The actual answer is we came on an an L1A visa. That's how we moved. But that really came about from
Me.
From
Driven by me. That's a very loaded and layered question, because we got here because we wanted to get here anyway. And then the second part of that question is, why at that point? If Selena hadn't been like, give me some time, I was genuinely just going to sell everything we had, pack and go to wherever would have let me in. So whether that was going to be Bali or Thailand, just to get out of the... It was mostly the traffic and the cold and the wet. That was it. So it just wasn't worth it for me. So that kind of triggered a domino effect that got us here quicker than maybe we would have outside of that.
Question number 3, how did we know which visa? So I've just mentioned that we came on an L1A and we had zero clue. So if you'd asked us any of these questions years ago about types of visas, non-immigrant,
Even
immigrant.
3 years ago.
Yeah, we wouldn't have known.
All I knew was green card. I thought the way you got to the US was somehow you got a green card.
Yeah, so I definitely didn't know the difference between the non-immigrant and an immigrant. I just assumed green card. I was then explained to about this non-immigrant type, which is a temporary working visa that would allow me to work in the USA for up to 7 years. How we came about being processed on an L1A was that the company introduced us to an attorney, an immigration attorney, who looked at the exact profile of the job I was doing at that time in the UK, also what job I was being transferred for, and the attorney were the ones that said L1A.
We mentioned this in the previous video in this series. The attorneys are the best people to make the assessment based on the case in front of them. And in the case that we were on the L1A, or you were on the L1A, you could have easily, if your job was slightly less senior, been on a H or an L1B.
Yeah.
So there are fine lines. It's really hard to work this stuff out by yourself.
The one thing that actually sticks out in my memory at the time was when I had the initial interview with the attorney, and then I met with the recruitment team from my company. They had all said how it was actually a good thing that they had vetted me at an L1A, because for them that is a very good type of visa. Again, something that I had zero appreciation of.
Question 4, what proof did we need to show in order to get our visa? For me, I didn't do anything. My proof was...
He just sits back.
Yeah, I don't actually remember doing any work. I might have done,
No, the work he done was looking into property straight away and where we were moving.
Yes,
The fun
true.
stuff. When can I quit my job? Already? Can we move in 3 months? How quick is this? So I pretty much did all of that with the attorney, and everything that I done was just based on what the attorney, again, if you'd asked me back then, I had zero clue. So I was literally following the steps that they said. We came on an L1A. What that meant was that I had to prove that I was working at an L1A level, which is a managerial or executive position. So in my case, they wanted documentation such as org charts. They wanted to know who was reporting directly into me, their titles, exactly what their roles and responsibilities were, what my role and responsibility was towards my direct reports, hiring, firing capacity. Do I manage a budget, as an example? So all the things that would quantify that level, I had to write all of that into this huge paperwork. There was this questionnaire that I needed to submit. I had screenshots of the org chart. That was mainly the proof that I needed to submit in order to prove that I was an L1A. But there are other things that we needed to prepare for the embassy interviews. The attorneys prepared the pack that we needed, but there were other things that we needed to go to the appointment with.
Like your criminal record or your criminal history, if you have one. Even if you don't, you have to declare that you don't, and they can look into this. I can't remember.
Marriage certificate was
Marriage certificate was
yeah.
another one. Did you have to do your education?
No, but they did say to put that in the pack in case they asked, but they didn't ask me for that at the
And I
interview.
guess that's just who is on the desk at the time, so it's always worth having that available to you. A lot of the way the US works, it can be down to the agent you get. It isn't always
is
prescriptive.
Some of it is subjective, even though you would imagine everything is very objective. perspective, it's not always that way. I was just thinking what else I could remember of that time. I'd got my offer in January 2020, and I think within 1 month, the attorneys had prepared all the paperwork. So by mid-February, I was booking my appointment for the London Embassy, and I think I got one for the following week. That's how quick it was. So I don't think now, if you're trying to book these types of appointments, they're as quick. So within 1 week, we had our appointment. We went, and I think we were there for about 3 hours. Yeah. It wasn't that long, and they approved mine very quickly. My interview was less than 5 minutes. And he was like, yeah,
paid all the fees.
Yeah, paid all the fees. I got my passport back with my visa within a couple of days. So imagine if the world didn't change.
Well, this is the bit I was laughing about. I was laughing because for anybody that has followed all of the videos, you'll know this journey, and it's far too long to get into on this, but we were in Thailand at the point it was kind of agreed in January 2020. We land back in the UK, and obviously the world had changed. And this is what caused a very lengthy delay in us moving to the States. We could have actually probably done it in less than 4 months.
Yeah, we would have been out because we would have got our visa in March of 2020.
Yes. Selena's came through, which is what she was saying, and mine required an extra few days processing. But those few days were right at the point Trump issued the proclamation and banned all travel to the US, which is what delayed us by a year or so. Otherwise, it would have been easily less than 4 months from
very quick
agreeing to moving, which would have been great for me because I could have come and enjoyed the sun.
I would love to know for the viewers there, because I know lots of you are going through this process at the moment or just moved to the USA. I'd love to know how long it's taking you guys to get your paperwork process.
Yeah, how long? Comment below if you either are in the process and kind of have been processed, or you've moved recently. How long did it take? Question 5 is, would we have moved to the USA sooner if we could have? My immediate response is to say definitely. I would have moved here at 14 if I could have. Actually, that's not true. When I think about realistically what happened, there were other opportunities that you could have taken, but we didn't, or Selena didn't take them because they weren't exactly right. And we were both in a really fortunate position in the UK. Weather and all of the other stuff aside, we both have pretty good jobs, pretty good careers, access to other jobs. We lived in relatively nice areas. So we weren't so desperate that we were willing to throw away opportunity to get it right. It came at the right time because I had honestly had enough. So would we have moved here sooner? No, I don't think that's the case. I think it was maybe a month later than it should have been, but it was at the right time.
Yeah, that would have been my answer. Actually, did good on answering that. There's nothing I could have said differently. When I thought about that question, I had that same immediate reaction. Of course, yes. But in reality, no, because everything was about timing. And I think for us, the fact that I got the right role, the relocation package, the leveling that I came in at, if I had taken an earlier opportunity, it probably would have been a very different visa type as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's no way you would have gotten an L1A.
Exactly. And I don't know about getting the green card from that particular visa as well, or whether that would have just been temporary and then we would have had to have gone back to the UK.
And another thing that happened as well based on that is the person I'm now working with is somebody that knew the manager that employed you into the US at the time.
Yeah.
So it kind of all
worked out,
fell into place. And I guess the point of this is you can try and rush these things, but I wouldn't necessarily force them. Unless it's right, it will come. If you're kind of driven to do these things anyway, it will come. Whether you have to do some stuff like go to university and find the right job, you may have to, but don't do it at risk. Like we said, don't just turn up with no visa and try and work on a holiday visa. You will be able to work it out.
And I just think, when I think back to when I initially wanted to move, I was 25. We moved here.
You were 35,
when we moved, when we moved here. So it took us time, and we get lots of people saying, oh, I'm really desperate, trying. It's just stick at it, put steps in place in order to get there. But things do work out if you put the right measures in place. And the last question is a bit of a bonus question is, was there anything we would have done differently knowing what we know now about the move to the USA?
We have answered this one before. The thing that immediately jumps out to me is bought a house on arrival. It's the thing that I still think about now regularly. We messed up majorly by not buying a house, and we lost out in excess of 100,000. Well in excess of 100,000.
Yeah, and I'm laughing, and that's not really
No, it's not funny at all. It's well in excess. So it's 110,000 in cash the house cost more. The mortgages doubled in that time also. Plus we paid somebody 40 grand to rent. Yes, 40,000. So we paid some random 40 grand, we lost that 100,000 immediately. And then the mortgage costs. That's my only true regret. I think everything else is kind of, you're learning as you go. We didn't have anybody before us to kind of lay out the path. There isn't really that much good information on the actual stuff required to move to the US and what you should do, which is why we're putting it out.
This is a really hard question. Definitely agree that we should have bought somewhere as soon as we arrived. But the first thing I actually thought about was, whilst I say I don't think I could have taken an opportunity earlier, and I think that we took the opportunity at the right time, part of me does wish that it was just a few months earlier. That's the only thing.
For what reason though?
Because of the ban. And if that hadn't have happened, we were so unfortunate just because of a few days. Because I'd started this discussion around this role about a couple of months just before, although things moved very quickly from the moment that I started working on that project. And it's not a way to live it, you know, I'm very happy that I'm here now, but in my mind, I do think if there was just even a month difference when we just initiated that process, Ant would have had his visa and we would have got to the USA. It is the only thing that I do genuinely think about. Had we have just processed our application a bit earlier, we could have been here, but then we would have been living in California, we would have been in a different place.
For the new people, we were originally, and not just originally, all of our boxes, I actually just sold a set of speakers and it had the original labels on it, which were labeled for California. Before the whole lockdown, we then swapped and moved to Las Vegas. So actually everything would have been different.
Yeah, would have been.
So that's the top 5 questions that we get asked, having now lived here for 2 years. If you have questions that you want answered about the move, particularly from the UK to the US, or from any other foreign country to the US that we haven't answered in this or in previous videos, let us know in the comments below.
If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button. Thanks for watching.